Thrilled for today's speaker. Tyler is going to introduce Courtney. It's amazing that we're having her talk she is the global marketing director for PADI worldwide. So Tyler will tell you more about her, but what I wanted to say first off is a thank you to Maxine Pierce and all the donors at Western that help make programs and a lot of things we do here possible. So we just want to give a thank you to her. And I want to tell you a little bit about next week's. Next week's topic, this is a very interesting topic. We're going to have Ashley Burke. He is a Western alum. He is a banking president, commercial bank president of Gunnison Savings and Trust, but he's also a board member of the Federal Reserve. We are going to be interviewing him next week. His topic is going to be comparing and contrasting the current recession with the 2008 recession. He has some cautionary tales, really interesting. If you're following it all, what's going on, this is very current. It's a hot topic. I hope that all of y'all will join us. If you want to participate in the interview and have a great question, let us know. Tyler is running this series. You can email him or me, and we're getting that all together. So here is Tyler Hannenberg, coordinator of the Maxine Pierce Speaker Series.
Welcome everyone, and thank you, Courtney Taylor, for coming and being here to teach us and open the door to something new or something that a few of us might know about. Courtney graduated from Boston College with a BA in English and also has a fine arts degree in classical theater from the University of San Diego. Courtney has over 20 years of marketing in the agency side and the brand side in many different companies. She's worked with the Game Show Network and the Hallmark Channel, and she also worked with the Buddy Group, which is an award-winning digital creative agency. Currently, Courtney leads global digital marketing strategy, leveraging owned, earned, and paid media at PADI. And PADI is a dive education and sports lifestyle company. Today we have the pleasure to dive into seeking adventure and saving the ocean. And so I just want to say thank you again to you, Courtney, and everyone here and everyone on Zoom as well. And we'll get right into it.
Thanks so much. I so appreciate it. It's such a pleasure to be here virtually. I apologize I'm a little late, had a little technical Zoom issue. First, I want to thank Louise and Joel and Peter and Western for inviting me here. So excited to talk to you all. I'm so excited to be invited here. So I think I'm going to start off with just a little video to set the stage a bit. I'm going to go ahead, and it looks like I've got screen sharing happening, Louise.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play this. Let me know if you can't see it, and we'll just take it from there.
Not seeing it yet.
We're not seeing it yet.
Okay.
We're seeing you. Look fabulous.
Share screen. There we go. How's that?
No, still seeing you.
We have to stop our screen share.
So Courtney
there we go.
There we go.
All right, here we go.
One single person can make a difference, and that person is you.
Uh-oh.
You can spark change for the ocean. We need passionate people who care about our planet, because it will take all of us to make things better. There is a growing community of explorers and adventurers coming together. A community that cares deeply about healing the planet above and below the surface. Together, we are turning passion into purpose to protect what we love. We're a community of torchbearers, sparking change for the ocean and inspiring others to follow our light. Your light will make us stronger and our future brighter. Spark change for the ocean. Be a torchbearer.
So we're getting our, trying to get in our AV on here. So anyway, this is ultimately sort of what we're talking about here. Let me know if you can see my screen.
We can.
We got it.
Fantastic. So the story sort of begins and ends with the ocean and those who cherish it and want to preserve it. PADI has always wanted to be sure that divers are aware that sharing the underwater world with its inhabitants is a privilege. So protecting the ocean planet is ultimately their responsibility as a community. So just a little bit of history here. In 1966, PADI'S founders, John Cronin and Ralph Erickson, out of concern for community and really the way that divers were trained and the lack of quality management in diver training, realized that they needed to create an organization of quality management and community for the diving community across the world. Quality management is incredibly important. If any of you have been diving, there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of really important tips and important quality management factors come into play when you're diving. So they started PADI, which is the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. Now, for 50 years, PADI's been at the top. PADI has 87% share of voice in and out of digital. So the company.
Courtney, really quick. We can't see your PowerPoint. We just see your computer.
No, we're just in the computer.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. So I am screen sharing.
You gotta click on your PowerPoint.
Click on your PowerPoint.
Yep, it's up.
She has to share a different screen.
There you
There we
go.
go.
We're good.
Woo! Now we're good.
Okay. So the important thing is that PADI's been around for 50 plus years. It started ultimately as a dive training organization for quality management, but ultimately at the end of the day, it went from sort of a membership focus to a consumer focus. So what's really important to understand is that it's starting to focus its efforts not only B2B, but also B2C. So now we have to engage and inspire consumers while also helping the dive shop and the pros, which are the business channel, give them the tools to also market to the consumer. So it's actually kind of an interesting way to shift into a digital community. Can you see my next slide?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, we're cooking with steam now. So with that comes a consumer brand plan, right? So ultimately in November of 2019, at the DEMA conference, which is ultimately the biggest dive conference in the world, Drew Richardson, who's the CEO, shifted the brand plan, the mission, the tagline, the ethos from PADI, which is the way the world learns to dive, to PADI, seek adventure, save the ocean. So the shift in that is the shift from business to consumer, right? So you're ultimately realizing now that with everything in play and the numerous business units that PADI has now, which is now called the PADI experience, PADI needed to create an emotional connection and it needed to change its mission, its tagline, and its ethos in order to do that. So this began a trajectory to lean in, to take action, and to engage and magnify the force for good. And ultimately, in this time, that trajectory needed to be digital. So at that point on, when he made that announcement, we had a really fast trajectory in digital to create awareness around this new mission and tagline. So that's ultimately sort of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So it starts with a strategic brand plan, obviously. So our overview is PADI's mission is to create 1 billion torchbearers to explore and protect the ocean. That's a pretty big mission, right? So it's going to have to use all of its muster in order to get that message out. Now, PADI, the organization, has started numerous new businesses. It's got PADI Learning, which is ultimately the e-learning, the training portion of that. It's got Club, which is ultimately sort of the community, sort of loyalty, if you will, program of PADI. It's got Gear, which is a merchandising arm of Patty, which sells shirts and hats and eco-friendly items, cups and straws and those kinds of things. And then Patty Travel, which is a full adventure-oriented booking engine. So this is all new in the last 2 years. We had to call this the Patty experience and then get it out to the public in digital. So ultimately, you need to know who your audience is, right? So over here, if you see who are the torchbearers and who the torchbearers can engage, this is the brand plan we had to put together to understand our audience in digital, whether it was paid, earned, or owned. And the content's going to be different depending upon where you are and what you're doing and what you're saying and who's consuming the content. So from that point, we had to look at the consumer brand journey, right? So ultimately, you've got the brand mission, right? Create 1 billion torchbearers to explore and protect our ocean. That's your umbrella plan for the organization's mission. Then you've got your brand vision. Well, the brand vision, which is your ethos, is to achieve balance between humanity and ocean. This is sort of the crux, right? This is where, as marketers and as digital marketers, we hook into that content and realize, okay, here's the content that we're looking at. It's balance between humanity and ocean, right? So the content is going to need to be tactful and emotional, but it also needs to educate people. And then the tagline, Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean, is going to be in everything that you do. That's how you sort of lay the groundwork there. A little bit about the Patty experience, learning, club, gear, and travel. That's sort of how we're going to get to people. And then ultimately, you have to have your measurements for success. It's easy with a brand like this to have beautiful content and just put it out there and say, good for us, isn't that gorgeous? But ultimately, if you don't have your bottom line KPIs, your measurements for success, you're really just sort of putting stuff out there to put it out there. So important that you create that strategic plan at all times. Is everyone good so far?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is what the Patty experience looks like creatively. So once you have that brand plan, you have an incredible creative team put together just the most beautiful sort of shot, but also kind of tactically understanding what each experience means and how the content is going to differ, right? By platform, by audience, by experience. So just a little bit about what that looks like when you're building a brand plan on the back end. Now, this is just a little bit of a look under the hood of Patty Social. Patty Social is incredibly engaging and has been for quite some time. It's important strategically to always be aware of your goals, like I said before. It's easy to lean on your content and let it go. Patty's especially lucky to have such beautiful content and marine life content. So, you know, there are a lot of brands on the flip side that share this beautiful marine life content. And it's not just dive brands, it's ocean brands. And if you notice, saving the ocean planet and saving the planet itself is a pretty big deal right now. So you're going to see a lot of content like this, and you're going to realize you've got a lot of competition. So this time, more than any other time, is a time not to be back on your feet. You need to lean in. So on the back end, on the Patty side, implementation of CPM parameters, ultimately tracking content by category and then being able to track back to the KPIs is what we had to institute in social media and across social media, so we knew what we were putting out there was getting something back. Now, if you put content together that says, okay, you know what, we just want this content to be pretty, that's okay. But you also have to balance it with, okay, this content is going to have this parameter so that we can feed it back and know that this is the content that we use to get revenue on the Patty Gear side. This is the content that we use to drive people to the Torchbearer landing page, and so forth. So really important to implement parameters so that you can track your social rather than just leaning back on your heels and saying, isn't this pretty, look at the whale shark, which can easily happen across brands, especially if they have beautiful content. So super important to note on that front. So ultimately, the other thing is that you can't wear yourself too thin, right? So Patty's bread and butter, as you can see here, when you're looking at sort of the followers and the goals, their bread and butter is really Facebook and Instagram. And in China, we check because China is a huge market for diving. So we have a huge office in China, a couple of them actually, but a big one in Shenzhen. So you need to look at what your resources are internally and look at your data that's coming back to you and really say, okay, we need to really focus our efforts here on these places that are getting us, that are moving us forward. Now that does not mean that you can't pick a trending platform and do some test and learn. Super important to do that. Fail fast is a mantra of mine and should ultimately, I think, be a mantra for any marketer because we don't learn or grow if we don't fail or test. So, you know, we fail fast and we move on. So for instance, TikTok is a great example here. It's difficult content for brands that don't have huge budgets to break into. And often it doesn't perform against the goal if the audience doesn't fit your brand. So from a social media perspective, just a little tip on that front. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the strategy as it relates to Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean. We're going to talk a little bit more about paid and owned. Earned is probably going to take a whole nother conversation with respect to PR. So I'm going to check in and make sure everyone still sees the presentation. Everybody's still good?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, awesome. And also, if anyone wants to interrupt me or ask a question, totally fine. I don't know, Louise, I don't know if you're cool with that, but.
Well, does anybody have a question so far? Okay, they know that a lot of them know they want to ask questions and they're going to do it at the end. So
that's great. Okay, fine. That's great. So digital marketing strategy when it comes to PADI'S mission is really getting people inspired fins off and fins on. We realized to protect the ocean planet. We realized that, well, when I came into PADI, I realized that diving can be a little bit scary for people and it's a little intimidating. So PADI through the 50 years has been very sort of exclusive around diving. And I know when I came in, I felt like if I wasn't an instructor, you know, I don't know if I had a place there, sort of thing. So what we realized is being inclusive is the way that marketers need to be, especially in a very competitive outdoor sports and industry, right? So as you all know, I know a lot of you are very outdoors people. I know that Western is really involved in sort of the outdoor experience and the outdoor business industry. Really important to be inclusive so that you don't feel like you are an outlier. So with this new mission, there's a fins off and fins on sort of content strategy, which has been super successful because I think everyone wants to protect the ocean planet in the way that they can, even if they can't do it under the water. So this is sort of where the torchbearer piece came in. So again, you're looking at a bottom line, right? So you can't just engage people and say, well, if people love this video and they're commenting on it, we've done our job. Ultimately, a business needs to stay afloat. No pun intended, but ultimately it needs to stay afloat. And you need money to do that. And the bread and butter of PADI, their core business, is certification. People need to be in the water in order for PADI to survive, right? So Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean being the overall tagline, our acquisition strategy was Start Your Adventure. So the Start Your Adventure campaign, which you see a little bit in this sort of coral picture up there, was the initial campaign of 2020 to get people in the water. And the pandemic is going to be a really interesting thing to talk about when I'm done with this, because acquisition changed an awful lot once travel stopped and everyone had to come home. So I'm really excited to talk about that because it was a very interesting sort of challenge from a digital marketing and data standpoint. So ultimately, I want to sort of give you a little bit of an idea of what the Start Your Adventure campaign looked like. Hopefully I can get the video to work a little better, so hang on real quick. Okay, so just the story behind this. This is really interesting because we realized that our old acquisition videos didn't feel tactile or emotionally connected in any way, shape, or form. It felt very trainery, which was okay for PADI, the way the world learns to dive. What I realized when I came in is that we needed content that felt tactile, that made someone feel like when they were in the water, they could hear and feel the bubbles, and they could see somebody who was just in their environment. So we found one of our influencers and said, look, we're going to put you through an open water diving course, which is the initial course, and then we'd like to get some cuts of your videos to use for our paid plan. So that was ultimately our acquisition video for our paid marketing plan. Super successful, really positive feedback, and it made people feel, oh, I really want to do that, and it doesn't look that scary. So just a little bit of sort of the behind, under the hood content strategy there. From an own perspective, from a paid perspective, that's your acquisition bread and butter, right? Because the people that are in your own media are already either divers or know you. So that's kind of where we set out to throw a net out and gain new people. On the owned status, we've got web, we've got the PADI blog, we've got email, which we have a huge database of, podcasts, PADI social, which I showed you at the very beginning, aggregated content, which is a really good example of what I just showed you. And we've got the Torchbearer mission, which is something I told you about a little bit before, which is 1 billion torchbearers. And then we've got events that we pull people into from an own perspective, like Shark Week, which is really not a Discovery Shark Week, but a Shark Week that's all about saving sharks. And our Project Aware arm, our not-for-profit arm, is over boots on the ground, just trying to get people to sign no finning laws and those kinds of things. Aware Week is another thing that just happened, where everybody across the world does something to help the ocean planet. We've got Women's Dive Day, and again, the PADI experience that I told you a little bit about. So the PADI blog, again, you can find that from PADI.com. It's got all sorts of amazing information. I'll show you sort of the homepage now because it's very secret venture. So the PADI blog is very Seek Adventure Save the Ocean. You can say this, making sustainable choices for the ocean. I urge you all to go there and check it out and just sort of doodle around in there. It's a beautiful blog. We get amazing engagement there. And tell me if you're not seeing these things. You're free to tell on this side. So
We're seeing them.
awesome, great. And then we just started podcasts this year for some amazing ambassadivers, is what we call them. Our ambassadors for the ocean are called ambassadivers. Paul Nicklin and Christina Mittermeier. If you haven't heard of them, follow them on Instagram, first of all, because they are spectacular photographers. Paul Nicklin is an award-winning photographer for Discovery and Nat Geo. He does some beautiful, beautiful stuff. They did our very first podcast. I urge you all to go and check that out as well. They are fantastic. So that's another digital strategy that we're using to get people interested and excited. And they're not just about dive stories. They're about conservation and Seek Adventure Save the Ocean. We've got all sorts of amazing people who have agreed to do this podcast. We've got things like Shark Week, which is obviously, you can imagine, incredibly popular. But on Facebook, we try to educate, right? So if you look at our friend, the Mako here, you hear him, but ultimately you can see the post, right? I'm the fastest shark on the planet. However, sadly and unfortunately, I'm still not fast enough to outswim human greed. So we're really, Shark Week we're using to educate, and it's incredibly engaging. People are really standing up and taking some chances and making some choices here. So all good on that front. Let me pause that. And then Aware Week
Before the
again.
break ate a ghost pepper, and it seems to just be kicking in.
Yeah, it's
Oops,
real life.
sorry,
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on here.
All right, so I said I'd give you $10,000. What's the charity?
And Ellen, who's great. No. So then we've got Women's Dive Day, PADI Travel, PADI Gear. And again, I said ambassadivers. So let's talk a little bit about this for a minute. We've got ambassadivers and influencers. So the difference between the two, we started an ambassador program, And ultimately, what we did with that program is we took people who are advocates for the ocean in two ways. One, they are community advocates. So these are ambassadors that are all over the world, that are boots on the ground, that are actually physically doing things in the small communities. For instance, we've got an ambassador who goes into the small communities who are shark finning. What we realize about shark finning in those communities is that they do that because they need to feed their families. So if we took that away from them without educating them in any other way, their families would starve. Now, we all know shark finning is wrong. It's horrific. So we have an ambassador who's amazing, who goes into these communities and teaches them how to be tourism experts for people that come into these beautiful places. So what they've done is replace their income with something else. And so I feel like that's an ambassador. That is somebody who is brave, who is not just saying you can't do that, you're a bad person, but is replacing revenue on their front so they can feed their family with something else. So that's an ambassador to us. Influencers, on the other hand, are these sort of micro influencers and major influencers who have lots of fans in social. So we use them for ultimate social outreach. So we have two kinds of influencers, if you will. If you see this little picture here of the guy with the fin and then the leg, fake leg, that's Mike Coots. Mike Coots is one of our huge influencers. He had his leg bitten off by a tiger shark when he was surfing, and he is now a diver and a massive shark conservationist. That's a great influencer for us. So just a little bit about that. Super excited about, and Mike is just a great guy, but an incredibly good, good influencer. So then at the end of the day, there needs to be a balance, especially in social, between education, engagement, and entertainment. The three should work together towards your KPIs, towards your goals, and towards your ethos and mission. So if you look at here, this is where education comes in. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to keep checking in. Right here is education, right? So we cover a lot of content from coral gardeners in Moorea. They are constantly replanting coral. We educate on that. PADI and Project Aware has a coral conservation course that spins off that anyone who's not a diver can be a part of. My teenage girls just finished that a few weeks ago. It's phenomenal. It teaches you all about the importance of coral planting and the importance of coral not only to the ocean planet, but to the full ecosystem of the planet. Again, plastic, huge deal. You can see now our big problem, and you've already probably thought about that, is masks. People are throwing masks away, they're ending up in the ocean. So now we're trying to educate people on that, about being responsible. And there are tons of fins on and fins off certifications now that are conservation focused that PADI and Project Aware offer up. Here's your engagement, right? So this up on the left corner, and honestly, there's so much content to share, I wouldn't even know where to start. So up in the corner, you've got a shark literally made out of ocean plastic taken out from the ocean. Pretty amazing. From an engagement standpoint, huge. And then down here, we've got Julie, who heads up our marketing for PADI brand, for the PADI gear, with the sort of new faceware for PADI gear during the pandemic. All of the PADI gear is made out of recycled ocean plastic. So again, super engaging. And then finally, on the entertainment side, I think first and foremost is to know what your audience wants, not what you think they want. Huge mantra, I repeat it over and over again. Data is important. Leaning in on what your audience is looking at, whether it's in social or web or email, and giving it to them is really, really important. This kissing turtles and beautiful fish under the ocean are what make people happy. Always give them that. So there's so much more to share, but I know that people have questions, so I'm gonna leave it there. Please follow along. Here's the website for the Torchbearer landing page, PADI.com/1billion. Please go there, become a torchbearer, and be part of the PADI community.
It's amazing. I know we have a lot of questions. The first question I have, and it's probably a very simple question. You had talked about the torchbearer mission is to get 1 billion torchbearers. And this is, explain a little bit more what a torchbearer is to me. I might have missed it.
Absolutely. So what's interesting is actually the history of I don't know. So if you look at the PADI logo, it hasn't changed much. The only thing that's changed about the PADI logo is, as we move on in the world, you can get it a little bit more circular or a little bit more specific. But if you see the diver in the middle of the globe is holding a torch, that's way back when, divers had to use actual torches in the water to be able to go cave diving or get deeper. So that torch has always been part of the PADI brand. What we're realizing is, like I said, fins on and fins off, people want to be able to save the ocean planet. Whether they're too afraid to get in the water and be a diver or not, it doesn't matter. There are beach cleanups. There are so many ways to save the ocean planet. So being a torchbearer is ultimately saying, I want to be of help. So that starts off on the digital strategy side, a consumer journey of torchbearers. So that sets off newsletters and information of the ways that you can help save the ocean planet from where you are in any way you want. So a torchbearer can be anybody that wants to be part of this community, be part of saving the ocean planet. Ultimately, the end goal, if you really look at it as a marketer, is to get people in the water. I mean, the end goal is let's get divers in the water. And everybody, above and below the surface for PADI, we're all community. So that's ultimately what the torchbearer community is. So it's ultimately a lead gen, right? So you're going to give your email address and you're going to say, I want to be a torchbearer, and you'll be part of a consumer journey where you're getting tips and information and content to tell you how to do that.
Nice.
That kind of answers one of my questions. I was going to ask how students like us who aren't around an ocean can be involved, but you covered that. But going off that, we have a beautiful lake and a lot of riverways, and water is a big, activity for sports and just hang out for a lot of Western students. How could we get involved, either through PADI or just starting a group here to, clean up waterways or do something in our community?
Well, I think it's really interesting. You can definitely do it through PADI, and I love that you asked that question, because what people don't realize, and this is sort of the flip side of educating people around diving and PADI, is that there are dive shops. In fact, we have tons of dive shops in Colorado. They're not just ocean related. So it's called the domestic dive shops, right? So we've got domestic dive shops in places like Colorado, in London, in New York, you name it. And they actually do a lot of their open water courses and diving in the lakes. So, so you don't have to be in an ocean to learn how to dive. So first of all, if you go to PADI, you'll see that there is a dive shop locator there. By all means, go and type in the zip and see what your closest dive shop is. So the first thing you can do is connect with your closest dive shop. They are your boots on the ground, and they are struggling right now. So they would love to have a community people say, hey, I want to help, right? Also, I think it's something that I can bring back to the company too. There might be a way for part of that journey to be, hey, you're not by an ocean? Let's talk about how you're going to be part of this community in Colorado, in the mountains. How are you going to do this in the rivers? And I think ultimately, the end of the day, the corporate social responsibility team at PADI is figuring out a way to put together a calendar so that people all over the world can bring up their zip code and figure out what they can do to help where they are. And ultimately, it's plastic, right? It's plastic trash. It's conservation there. It's single-use plastics, right? Cutting down on that and creating a community yourself where you are to be able to do that, but also creating maybe a Facebook community too, which is actually pretty amazing. Then you get in people that you don't necessarily know that are in your area that might not be part of your sort of your closest group. I think Facebook groups are amazing, and they're actually really on a trend now and starting to sort of gain speed. So that's another great way to do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you spoke pretty briefly about some of the accommodations and decisions you've had to make along the way, especially in a global pandemic environment. Just what are some of those accommodations and decisions you had to make, especially in your strategic rebranding initiative?
Absolutely. So in November, early November in Orlando, the CEO made this amazing sort of shift to the entire B2B dive community. And we thought this is going to be great. So we hit February, March, and everything shuts down. Well, we can't use the PADI travel on because no one's traveling, and they're definitely not going to be on dive boats. Certainly not on liveaboards, right? Together on a boat diving. So we had to sort of shift and say, okay, what is our strongest point right now? What is the strongest thing we can do? And so I took over diver acquisition. We have something called e-learning, which is what you do at home on your computer, on your iPad, on your phone. It's the initial part of your dive certification course. Open water e-learning is the diver acquisition at home e-learning. So we said, okay, it's going to be e-learning. E-learning is ultimately going to have to be our bread and butter right now until all of this blows over. So we had to understand what people were consuming. And I talked a little bit about this with Louise and Joel. The fascinating thing is every week was different. So the initial strategy we put together had to be, the messaging had to be something about being at home. Everyone was kind of over by that time, the whole, you can travel from your kitchen to your bathroom or whatever that was. That was very short-lived, and people used that a lot. People got really tired of that. And with the content that PADI had, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. So we came up with adventure doesn't have to wait. So what we wanted to do, sort of initially before that, which was kind of interesting, we had people actually aggregating content for us. Divers all over the world were doing sort of those stop motion videos, which maybe Louise, maybe I'll send to you a couple of little extra links that people can look through, which were so fun, where they did stop motion like they were in the ocean, but they used their pillows and their sheets and their towels and made it look like ocean. Really
We would love that.
Yeah, really fun. So a lot of user-generated content happened in that first week or two while we were trying to figure out, what do we do now, right? So by the time that sort of blew over and people were getting a little tired of that, that's when adventure doesn't have to wait happened. We put together this messaging for digital, for paid and earned and owned, ultimately because people wanted to know that the world was still out there. The oceans were still out there. The beauty was still out there. The Great Barrier Reef is still out there. That adventure doesn't have to wait. If you get started now with your e-learning, right, then you're ready when this world opens up to do your open water. And that really worked. And the interesting thing is we really kept with paid search and social because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do display at that point. And this is sort of under the hood stuff. And with that, we were incredibly successful, and we actually did the revenue of pre-COVID because we were so specific about listening to the audience. Instead of saying, this is kind of what they want right now, and let's lean back on our heels, every single day, I worked with our agency and our brand team and our digital team to say, okay, what's hooking them now? Let's look across the world, not just at PADI, but at people, and figure out what it is they want. So there was a lot of keyword research. A lot of the whole social team was leaning in on a daily basis and monitoring and responding and really understanding, okay, when did this shift happen? When did we shift from stay at home to adventure doesn't have to wait? And then when do we shift from adventure doesn't have to wait to we're almost there, let's start opening up local diving. So after adventure doesn't have to wait, we realized, okay, Australia's opening up. And because we're a global company, we had to go, okay, everybody shift their focus to Australia and let's open up the Great Barrier Reef and let people know in Australia, hey, you can travel within your own country now. Here's where your local diving is. So if you could see, there's 3 different parts there. You had to be really careful when that shift happened. And on the positive side, what happens is you realize that this isn't just about pandemic. There's a lot of people saying, oh, 2020 is, it's done, forget it, But what's interesting is everything that we've learned being specific and knowing our audiences is something that now we're going to take with us when everything, gets back. If people are opening up marketing, you're realizing, okay, now I really know what my audience wants. Now I can really beat the competition, or now I really can be specific about my content. Especially in something like email, right? If you're looking at sort of CRM and you're segmenting, I'm probably getting a little too detailed out, but if you're segmenting your audience, now you really know how to do that, right? You're not just throwing a big net and having your audience say, wow, I don't think you really know me. So I think the pandemic, on the positive side, teaches us to be very specific, to lean forward and really learn who our audience is. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, it does. We have a question from Zoom. Sean?
Hey, Zoe. First of all, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm just kind of curious, kind of the different strategies you use when recruiting the ambassadors versus influencers. I know it sounded like there's a little bit of crossover there, but how do you go about finding like-minded people that you think fit the ethos of your company?
Sure, absolutely. So the Ambassador program is actually a program that we created all over the years with people that we knew we're basically ambassadors of PADI. What's interesting about that, though, is that when I came in a couple years ago, we had so many ambassadors because it was a lot. It's a little bit of a challenge when you have a B2B and a B2C company, because your business channel says, I want this, you're working for me. So they would say sort of, I called this guy and he's really cool and I told him he could be ambassador, right? So which I really appreciate, but to get to a point where it's not a program anymore, it's just, hey, this guy's nice, we want him to be an ambassador. So we created a program with criteria, very specific criteria, and we created a landing page and basically a window of time where people could either apply to be an ambassador or refer someone. So that's kind of what that piece is. Now, influencers is something that we're using with our influencer tools, right? So your usual sort of social media tools, your Toros and things like that, where you follow your influencers by category, find out who their influencers are, and that's sort of a different, that's a different animal where we tell them, hey, we want you to share this content, but if it's a project, let's put together a contract, right? So influencers are more social. They're a little bit less close to us, but they're willing and able. A lot of like the travel, like I don't know, for those of you that don't follow things like the Bucket List family, unbelievable group of influencers, right? It's a family of people that do nothing but travel. Those kinds of things, right? The globetrotting grommets and those people, those are influencers for us that really sort of talk about travel. So it's very PADI travel oriented. Ambassadors are either boots on the ground or community people saying, hey, PADI'S here. We all want to work together to save the ocean. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
I have a question. Yeah, I was a little curious. It seems like you all really fine-tuned on what your customers want versus what you think they want. I was just curious to hear like the thoughts behind, like, do you look at different key performance indicators, or do you say like, oh, we post 20%, entertainment, 30% education? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts behind that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, to be honest. So we have data people. Okay, so we have data people looking at the web. So you've got people on PADI.com pulling data and keyword work and SEO work there. On the social front, the community team, the community managers across the globe. So the way that PADI's set up, there's a community manager and a team in every region. So there's EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then you've got the Asia Pacific region, and then there's the US region, and we've got China, which is China and Japan are a little bit different. They're a little bit in a different place, but basically you've got community managers across the world on the clock 24/7. So everybody sort of picks up, so there's someone moving at all times. That's mostly monitoring and responding to your people that are already there and really pulling things out in that way. So very sentiment oriented, but on a data front, it's really the UTM parameters that we've set up by category. And then each of those categories is laddered back to a KPI, right? And the KPI can be just engagement, but ultimately we look at that data and say, okay, this is not working towards this goal. Why is that? And then we'll look at them and say, well, it looks like we put out, for instance, it looks like we put out, a shark image to people that are actually looking more at, trying to figure out about their open water training. And we're not in whale sharks yet. They're trying to figure out, how do I clear my map? So a lot of that, it's data mixed with sentiment, but ultimately it's all about having things come together with a data team and having, taking a look at that ultimately. From a paid perspective, it was really SEO and keyword research. So we needed to understand what people across the globe were looking at. Then you would sort of focus it in on sort of sports and ocean conservation. And then you would sort of focus it in on, okay, what keywords are they using to consume this content? A little bit of everything, but it's a pretty amazing team working together. It's definitely war room type stuff.
Awesome. Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody
Yes,
else?
I have a question. Courtney, I'm Greg Salisbury. Thank you for speaking to us this evening. And I'd like to pick your digital marketing brain for a moment, if I may.
Sure.
And related to our own university here, we have an interesting challenge because some will refer to us as a rural university. That's polite. More realistically, we are remote. We have more elk than humans here. And we also have limited resources. Higher education is going through its greatest transformation ever, and it's getting more and more competitive and more difficult, particularly as the market for college candidates, particularly destination school candidates, shrinks. And that's going to continue for at least a half dozen more years. With our limited resources, what recommendations would you have for us from a digital standpoint? Where should we concentrate to get the greatest bang for our buck, if you will? And because the vast majority of our market is nowhere with it. They don't drive by us on an interstate highway, and we don't even have a viable airport. We have a subsidized single flight a day kind of thing. And so we're having to reach out digitally to reach the vast majority of our market. What recommendations would you have for us along those lines?
Sure. So this is sort of along the lines of looking at your resources and then looking at what works best for you. It's kind of the Facebook versus TikTok idea, right? So I think, and it depends on, first of all, you have to figure out who your audience is. I mean, obviously for Western, you're probably looking at something, a couple of things. One, Gunnison and Colorado are beautiful, beautiful places, right? And there's a lot of outdoor conversation happening at the university. There's some beautiful content that I think would pull people in there. I've been to Gunnison. I lived in Colorado Springs for a while. The beauty there is amazing. And I think there's a lot of visual content that can happen there that can pull people in. That's on the engagement front. I think that it's definitely about search, right? You need to pull people in and make them aware of where you are, of who you are, and of what you stand for. So I think there's an emotional connection that can happen, a visual connection that can happen, and then really sort of down and dirty, it's really keywords. Like, what is the strength there? And it doesn't have to be a big budget ultimately, but you probably want to get out there outside of your own sandbox a little bit and try to test and learn what's going to pull people in. I would say, I mean, not to build your sort of strategy for you, but I would say use that visual content. Use the beauty of Colorado and Gunnison to pull people in. Look at Facebook in the way of sort of a paid social standpoint with the right sort of wording. Look at keywords that will pull people in. Look at what your mission is and what emotionally connects people to who you are. And use a little budget to spread a net out and pull them in there. I would start there because you have so little resource, and then test and learn, right? See what works, fail fast and try again. But I think you've got three really important things there, right? Which is education, what strengths are there that people might not know about, utilize that in search for warm leads that people are searching for places to go that they might not see you from an awareness standpoint. Work on engagement from the visual standpoint of the beautiful place that Gunnison is. And then test and learn and optimize and see what's working. I really think that it might find an audience or a bunch of people that you didn't even know existed by trying out your keywords and trying out your messaging and paid a little bit. And it doesn't take a very big budget to do that, especially if you're just starting. Hopefully that helps.
Well, thank you, Courtney. And just as an aside, I have to share this with you if you're not aware. Do you know who Barry Clifford is?
I don't.
He's one of the foremost underwater archaeologists, and he and his team are the ones who discovered the first pirate shipwreck off the coast of North America, the Widdet, some 300 years after it went down. And they're also the team that looks like they have found the Santa Maria off the coast of Haiti.
That's amazing.
And,
are you a diver?
Yes, I have been, but the important thing is Barry Clifford is a Western alum.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Who would have guessed? You come to Western to learn about diving, and
I love that. I'm writing that down. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's, you know, the wrecks and things like that. I mean, this is a whole nother story, but we worked, the DEMA before last, when we were in Las Vegas, we had all the people that saved the soccer team in the cave came in with us through all of DEMA, and we spent the entire week with them, and boy, they were amazing. Those guys that saved those kids in those caves were so phenomenal.
Okay, does anybody else have anything? Well, I want to thank Courtney again. Actually, we found Courtney. This was like meant to be, because we had a speaker back out, and I went to Joel, who is my go-to guy now on every. I don't think the Career Success Office could, you know, he helps me with IT and all this kind of stuff and helping me just Joel. And he said, I have a sister who is the director of global marketing at PADI'S. I was like, oh my gosh. So Courtney Taylor is Joel Watson's sister. So when he said you look fabulous, he meant like, hey sis, you look great, you know. So but the one thing I want to tell you that might get Patty interested in Gunnison and Western outside of Barry Clifford, because that's a really cool one. We need to do something with that. Is we have an underwater town. We flooded for our, and please jump in if I'm saying this wrong, but we have Blue Mesa Reservoir, and it flooded a town to create a water, where we get all of our water. So you can dive down into, and there are cars down there. Is there a house?
I mean, last I heard, it is actually like a pretty decent sized for.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a town.
really a bar.
There's a bar. No, giant bar. So maybe we'll have to bring some Patty ambassador divers or influencers here to take a dive, and that's kind of an interesting story, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, what we'll do is we'll contact the territory director and regional director for that area, and we'll connect you.
Perfect. I just think this is great. So I just am excited. This could not have been a better talk today. I don't know, the photography is beautiful. What you're doing is just awesome.
Thank you for your patience on the AV front. I had a couple little hiccups, but not too bad. So thank you for your patience, Brett.
You're talking to a person I have no room to talk. And I've been out the wrong Zoom link all week long. So anyway, thank you again. Thank you for all the students who came.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, and our president, the president of Western is Greg Salisbury. So Dr. Salisbury was the one asking the question. So just to let you know that.
Oh, fantastic.
We appreciate him being here as well. And we have our Dean of the Business School on Zoom. I saw that our Outdoor Industry MBA head of that was on Zoom. So, and of course, Joel, this couldn't have worked technically and without him, all of it without him. So thank you students. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week for our talk on the Federal Reserve and what's going on and everything. So Courtney, thank you. I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you.